Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Pastrnak sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Patra right in, and goalie scores. Oh my, what a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand. Score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I will be your host today. I am Maria from Watertown. We are recording today's episode on Monday, November 3rd, after daylight savings time change, fall back, which I think absolutely blows. But I want to welcome in my co-host, who looks nowhere near as tired as I feel with the time change, Karoline with a K. How are you?
I'm good, Maria. This is the time change I like because I get extra sleep. So I'm relatively well rested.
Stand the darkness. I went out and played a quick 9 holes yesterday afternoon, and by the time we got to the 9th hole, the sun was already setting, which to me is obnoxious. I do not enjoy this time of year, but be that as it may, we have a lot of hockey to talk about. Mostly good hockey, We are going to today talk about how we feel about Marco Sturm, if he's pushing the right buttons at this point in time. We've got a couple of injuries, unfortunately, that we need to talk about, and the adjustments that have been made in the lineup as a result of these injuries. We also can talk about finally the youth movement on this current roster, making a little noise for themselves, right? But
promising. Very
before
promising.
we dive into all things Boston Bruins, we'll take our usual spin around the rink. And I don't know about you, but it seems like there's not a lot of hot news happening right now around the league. Everyone's, going about their business relatively quietly. But there was a little scary thing that happened in the Toronto Maple Leafs game recently where Chris Tanev had to be taken off the ice in a stretcher against the Philadelphia Flyers. I read the report this morning. He's back home and resting. But, regardless of how we feel about any franchise and rivalries, the last thing anybody wants to see in hockey is a player get stretchered off the ice.
Yeah, that was crazy to see. I didn't catch it live, although I know some folks in our Discord group did. I was watching the replay clip, and it seems like it's just one of those really freak accidents because it didn't look like a particular, crazy hit or falling to the ice in some sort of dangerous way. It was a mid-ice collision. The only thing I can kind of speculate on is a whiplash kind of situation, and he has concussion history. So I can only imagine that that's what actually happened because it's not like he slammed into the boards or something like that. So it's scary to see. It's awful, quite frankly, when a player has to get taken off the ice in that way. So hopefully he recovers soon.
And he just had come back. Chris Tanev had just come back. It was his first game back after missing several games from a prior injury. So, again, regardless of what color sweater, none of us ever want to see that. So,
right.
Wish him well. The other piece of news is it seems like the Tampa Bay Lightning are the hottest team in the league right now, where they've won 5 games in a row. And, I know at the start of the season when everyone was making their, preseason predictions, the Tampa Bay Lightning is a team that a lot of people have on their radar to be in the playoff mix.
Yeah. And what was crazy is the fact that they had a pretty horrible start. They fell at the starting line, so to speak, and they were at the bottom for a little bit, and they've been steadily crawling their way right back up to the top. I mean, the pros and cons of this condensed season is you don't sit around and wait to see if whatever adjustments here and there are going to work. It's make the adjustment, get the results from that pretty quickly. And I think Boston has benefited also from that kind of experiment because there's very little time in between. Granted, this means maybe there's less time for practice, but I mean, it's more time for execution. And if you don't have a lot of time to waste, I think there are teams that are benefiting from this condensed schedule, just like Tampa is, able to just make those changes and go from there.
Right. And I don't think the Bruins have been one of those teams that's been able to benefit from that. And Cam Neely spoke to that during the NESN broadcast during one of the games this week, and that the Bruins and the Calgary Flames have played the most games out of any team in the league right now, which, is, I'm not quite sure I understand how that happens, but he alluded to the fact that, they haven't had a lot of time to practice and work on this defensive, structure system here that we keep hearing about. Hopefully that is going to start leveling off here in the coming weeks. We shall see, but every team is going to be subjected to this at some point this season because of that Olympic break.
Yeah.
So,
So, to your point, yes, Boston doesn't have the time to experiment in a practice environment, which is safer. However, they are throwing things out there and seeing if they're going to work in real time in game situations. And for good or for bad, at least they're not then wasting those precious few practices on something that might not then actually work out well on the ice during a game. So, little pros and cons for that. But this right now is the longest, I think, little break stretch that Boston has had since the start of the season, which is they played on Saturday. They had Sunday. Well, I don't know if they had it off, but there's no game on Sunday. No game
They also practice on Sunday, I believe. And then to a team. There was a team event or an event that was together for season ticket holders on Sunday that the players needed to attend for a couple of hours. So I would imagine that they'll be back on the ice practicing today.
But ultimately, what ends up happening is I believe they have 3 games pretty much in regular, close succession every 2 days. Then they'll have another mini 2-day break. And then they are effectively going straight every other day from November 11th all the way through November 29th before they have their next 2-day no game break, which is absolutely bonkers. It is every other day a hockey game, which
not great for us either that are watching all these games. It's nice to have a little respite from the game.
I know. Right. But I bite my tongue because come July and August, I'm dying for hockey. So I have to remind myself this is good. This is good for us.
And during that stretch you just talked about, it'll take them out to the West Coast for that annual road trip. But be that as it may, we have had some good hockey finally come across our radar here. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the injuries that have just occurred. So we'll start quickly with the Jordan Harris injury.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's going to be out apparently for at least a couple of months to repair a right ankle fracture, which is unfortunate because, I saw some good potential in this player.
Yeah, it was huge. His contributions, he was doing a really great job, especially when Hampus was out, and I didn't catch what had happened to him. It wasn't even obvious that he had been injured while playing because, play hadn't stopped. So either he was just in beast mode that whole time, or maybe it was just one of those injuries that maybe it didn't straight up hurt in a way that kind of was alarm bells for him. But whatever it was, he got attention pretty quickly and basically immediately underwent surgery, which tells you that, okay, well, that's a pretty serious situation. And hopefully, ever since Torrey Krug hurt his ankle, I always get so nervous. I get so nervous when I hear about a player having ankle surgery because Torrey Krug's career basically has come to an end prematurely because of just weird healing coming from an ankle injury. So fingers crossed that Harris recovers really well. I mean, he's super young, so, I don't know.
Yeah, and I had him, pegged for taking Mason Lohrei's spot, which he, I think he has the potential to do. And we'll get to Mason Lohrei as we start breaking down the week that was for the Bruins. But
Yes.
yeah, I hope that he will recover quickly and then, be able to, get back on the ice to add to the defensive depth that the Bruins, I think, sorely need, especially if you are going to be focusing on your defensive structure.
Yep.
The other big injury that just occurred is, we get one Lindholm back and the other Lindholm goes out. So Bruins get Hampus Lindholm back in the lineup, and lo and behold, Elias Lindholm goes out with an injury. And the latest information that I could find this morning was that it's some type of a lower body injury.
We know it's a knee.
It has to be a knee, right?
God, we have eyeballs.
Right. I know. But you know how hockey.
And they won't. Yeah.
Yeah, they will not specify a body part ever. But he left the Sabres game in the second period and didn't return. Apparently, Elias had an MRI on Friday, October 31st. I don't think there's been any subsequent update on the results of the MRI, but what we do know is he is expected to be out for a few weeks, which is
not awesome,
not ideal,
especially considering he has most certainly turned a page in his career in Boston, and so to see him only so many games in, now he's got to be out and stopping some of that momentum. It's such a bummer for him because we could see it. We could see what we got him for, why he was signed, So it's really frustrating. But the promising thing, at least for right now, although who knows, because things can always change, things can get backdated. Right now, he is just on IR. So that's a positive thing. I think they'll probably have him on IR for as long as it takes to either make a decision about what's going to happen next for him, if it's going to be actually a lengthy period of time, because I would assume that they would be very conservative in terms of let's go do any kind of surgical anything, unless it's like you have to, like a fracture, like a broken bone, where time is of the essence, that if you don't do surgery, you're going to make things worse. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some of that that's happening and they're just kind of waiting to see how that develops and how his body responds. So if things don't look like they're going in the right direction, then I would definitely expect them to put him on LTIR to bring in then someone else if necessary. But they honestly, it seems like they have everything in hand with the young guys that they've brought in. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not missed, because he certainly is, but it's been okay.
He's going to be, I mean, for sure he's going to be missed, right? You can patch things together for the short term. I think the biggest void is going to be with respect to Eland Holmes' injury is the power play, because all of his goals thus far this season have come on the power play, and the power play has been meh, for lack of a more technical descriptor.
Right.
It hasn't been as impressive as one would hope, but I think 5v5, you might be okay.
Right.
Where you're going to have to fill the void is likely on those on the first power play unit. But we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that. What I want to start this episode with is the question of, has Marco Sturm finally started to get his message across and pushing the right buttons? Now we'll start the conversation with the just god awful game against the Ottawa Senators, where the Bruins lost 7-2. And I think we said all we needed to say about that game in our snapshots, but suffice it to say that they had nothing, absolutely nothing going on in that game, pretty much from top to bottom. And as the game went along, I noticed that I did not like the body language coming from just about everybody in a Bruins uniform, including the coaching staff. Particularly to me, Pasta did not look engaged at all in that game. And that gave me a lot of pause for concern. Like, what is happening here? Are these players shutting down already? Because that was one thing we had talked about in previous episodes, that this team didn't seem to have a willingness to give up.
Yes.
Whereas in that game against Ottawa, it seemed like they gave up. Now, the Bruins started off decently in that game because Morgan Geekie put them up 1-0. And then Stutzel does his normal, someone's going to touch me and I'm going to take a dive. And the refs fall for it. They're on the power play, and Ottawa ties the game up 1-1. The Bruins had a decent first period, and then when the wheels fell off the bus, they flipping fell off a cliff in that game.
Yeah, it was as bad as the Anaheim game was, because that, prior to the Senators game, that was the worst game that they had played all season. As bad as that game had been, at least what the Bruins that we saw on the ice for that circus performance was we'll call them the new Bruins. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep playing. We're not going to fold like a deck of cards. We're just going to keep playing our game.
They talked that game against the Ducks.
And we saw that when you maintain that positive attitude, that no quit attitude, you can start to get somewhere. And they ended up, scoring 2 goals at the end there to really make it seem like there was a chance that they could recover that game. The game against the Senators was a copy and paste from last season. I don't know, obviously, what happened. Why, in this particular instance, this game was so reminiscent of what we saw from them last year. Certainly, were there things that happened to them that were out of their control that put them behind the 8 ball? Absolutely. That's something that is always a possibility in any game that they play, any team plays. But I just cannot explain what had happened. I mean, they lost complete control over themselves. They left Swayman hanging. Granted, it wasn't necessarily his best night, but perhaps it just got to the point where I don't recall necessarily him being, blatantly terrible or, like completely out of position and not doing his job necessarily. And also, quite frankly, the Senators have had his number for years. This is a team, for whatever reason, he struggles against. Every goalie has that team. So that Senators are his, which stinks because they're in our division. It's not very helpful. It was horrible. It was the worst game I've ever seen, ever.
And I'll take it a step further, where and this wasn't exclusively on this pairing, but in this Ottawa game, it was glaring to me that Mason Lohrei and Charlie McAvoy, as a defensive pairing, are a train wreck together. They are an absolute train wreck together.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't appear that there's any kind of cohesiveness with the way that each of them plays or communication when they are out on the ice together.
Yeah.
In addition to that, this was a stat that I heard Brian Johnston, who does the radio broadcast for the Bruins. That game against Ottawa was the first time in 7 years that the Bruins gave up 4 power play goals in one game.
Wow.
Not pretty.
No.
Not pretty.
No. And I can't quite put my finger on what the problem is necessarily with that particular pairing of Lohrei and McAvoy. We've talked about individual issues with each of those players, how we would really love to see Charlie be this kind of player, or Lohrei, he's great at this, but he needs to be more this. But then together, it becomes compounded, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not really.
No, it is, because
understand.
Each player has a distinct nature to their game. Charlie apparently can't play the game that we all need him to play and want him to play and know that he can play when he's worried about, is Lohrei going to pinch at the wrong time?
Right.
Or is he going to pinch at the same time that I'm pinching? Or is he going to, cough up the puck when I'm getting ready to do something else? So it's just not a cohesive unit in any way, shape, or form. So let's move forward then to the game against the New York Islanders, because, we also had alluded to the fact that we thought it might be time for young Mason Lohrei to have a seat and watch the game from afar, right? Or somebody needed to have a seat and watch the game from afar, because Marco kept talking about, on more than one occasion in just recent weeks, about guys not buying in. Everybody needs to buy in.
Concern, by the way. The fact that we've heard him say that a couple of times, is a massive concern.
Right. I agree with you. Because it begs the question of what is going on here. Are they not listening? Is it the system too difficult to grasp, or are guys not wanting to grasp the system? So be that as it may, we will now move on to the game against the New York Islanders that the Bruins ended up winning 5-2.
Yeah.
The game started off as poorly as
it was a continuation of the night before. It was horrible. Well, I was like, here we go again. So I'll let you take the lead on this game, because it was night and day from that first period into the second period. It was almost like it was a completely new game. It was, who knows? Somebody said something, somebody did something, and they were completely different. They scored 3 unanswered goals. We had our power play goal by Lindholm.
No Mason Lohrei in this game. And Hampus Lindholm. Hampus Lindholm was back in the line.
Yes. And I want to say it was almost as if, I don't know, like just the switch went off in their heads and they were like, oh, this is what we actually need to do. We've talked about in last week's podcast episode, we just need to see Boston take advantage of one more opportunity. One more opportunity can make a huge difference. And this was one of those games where that was the case, where we had that extra opportunity that they took advantage of in that power play. And we saw, again, Mike Yesamont getting out there and doing his thing. And those lower lines for a stretch of time towards the end of the unpleasantness, we'll call it, they started to get quiet again. It almost seemed like we were back to one singular line going, towards the end of that losing streak. And all of a sudden, we started seeing movement in action. We saw Yesamont scoring. And then even going into the next couple of games, we've started to see more of that depth scoring again. We've had Arvidsson score goals. We've seen Kastelik. If he hasn't scored a goal, the man is about to score another goal.
He popped a goal into the net during this stretch of
he's been
good
chomping
play.
at the bit.
Casey Middlestat has been contributing, and we're going a little off topic here, but I really like the chemistry that is developing between Casey Middlestat and Victor Arvidsson.
Yes. We've just seen what, again, it just literally like a light switch has been flicked on. We now all of a sudden see all of the different parts moving in the way that they need to be moving, that they're doing their different kinds of jobs that are required of them. And ultimately, I think that is what has contributed over the last 3 games that the Bruins have played and have been able to win. So it tells me more so than I felt earlier in this season thus far that maybe the talent isn't really the issue. That, okay, no, they clearly have the ability to win games. They can win games decisively if they are doing their jobs. They clearly can. So now they are setting themselves up to this expectation that we're all going to have from here on out, especially after the Carolina game that we'll talk about shortly. But that was a massive expectation setter for.
So there's been slow improvement so we'll start with whatever happened in between the first and second period of the Islanders game, where the Islanders scored on their first shot on goal, and then shortly after that made it 2-0.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened in between periods of that game. If somebody said something, I hope that someone did, because I know what I would be saying if I was in that locker room. We're not doing this shit again tonight. Not at home.
No,
not at home. And the Bruins came out a totally different team in that second period, to the point that when the Bruins scored 3 unanswered goals, Patrick Roy was forced to call a timeout, to get his team back in order again. And, the Bruins didn't take their foot off the gas for the most part, even though they had a 3-2 lead going into the third period. They were able to extend that lead on another goal by Morgan Geekie, and I think they also killed off a 4-minute penalty in that game.
Yeah. And I think, again, if we take a step back and kind of look at these 3 games that they've won, and to your point of the slow progression of improvement and getting used to being in these newer lines, we've had a little bit of adjustment of lines that we've now seen for at least 2 games, right? Lindholm has missed 2 games.
Correct.
This is allowing the team to also develop that chemistry, getting used to each other, getting used to those particular line mates and pairings. And I think what we saw, particularly in the Islanders game, because again, it was 2 very different teams that we saw play, it wasn't just that the Islanders are what I've started to call, like, they're a little bit of the Wild West hockey. It's a lot of young kids. They're not particularly great, but they can be a lot of fun because they might have a lot of chances. They take advantage of chances. So, because there have been definitely games that we've seen Boston play where they win, and it's like, well, did they win because they were actually the better team, or did they win because the other team was just worse and they kind of got the win by default in that case? Here, I don't think that the Islanders necessarily got worse. I think they stayed relatively stable and the same, and it was Boston that truly made the improvements that we saw and continued to see into the next two games.
And one of the notable big changes for me, well, a couple of big changes, right? Marek Kostadinov has been holding his own on that top line. The other big change for me, and I'm praying that Marco Sturm doesn't change this for the foreseeable future, is Zadorov and McAvoy playing together.
Yeah.
They are a couple, they have been in this stretch, wrecking balls, and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. It takes me right back to the Mighty Ducks. We've got our Bash brothers here because I honestly, I feel like we've probably talked about this combination in theory before in the past during a summer episode or whatnot. And this cannot be the first time that we have seen the two of them play together, but maybe it is, but it can't.
Well, no, I think we've seen snippets.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen I don't think as large of a sample size as we have seen in this, four game stretch here, call it.
Yes. And Zadorov is really playing kind of a different game now too. He's really, really just locked in, and he's doing all the really good things that we saw from him periodically in the last season. He's been a much more consistent defenseman, a really solid, classic defensive defenseman. And when we had our summer episode where we talked about the different roles and the jobs of the different pairings and what is an ideal pairing situation, I don't think that we really considered pairing Charlie McAvoy with someone who was a defensive defenseman, because Chucky he's kind of he's a little bit of a unicorn in the sense that he's not quite the pure two-way defenseman like you would see Hampus Lindholm, because he's not nearly as offensively minded as him or as offensively minded as Lohrei wants to be. He's also not super defensive defenseman like Carlo was or Zadorov is. So he's kind of like this, I don't know, in between something. And so I think for the longest time, we all assumed that, well, for him, you have to pair him with an offensive defenseman. But apparently, we see him in his best role yet with a defensive defenseman. And quite frankly, it makes a lot of sense considering what we have seen from him over the last several seasons, where when he was in positions and partnered with people who required let's say even a touch more supervision, and I'm talking about going all the way back to Matt Grzelcyk, because what did I love to say about him? The same thing I'm saying about Mason Lohrei, which is when he's good, he's great. When he's bad, my God, is it horrible? And he had to periodically, fix his mistakes and be aware of not just the play in front of him, but what his partner is doing. And I think for the first time in a really long time, probably since he was paired with Zdeno Chara, he doesn't have to take that responsibility on.
He can relax. It seems like he can relax, play a game, play his game,
yes,
take a risk, knowing that, Z number 2 is going to be back there, pretty much ready to knock someone's block off.
Right.
So, I think it's been beneficial to Charlie's game. And I do hope that Marco maintains that pairing for the foreseeable future. I know, at some point, they're going to need to figure out what to do with Mason Lohrei. Now, Mason Lohrei he sat out the game against
the last two games.
He
did play a game where he was paired with someone else, though, didn't he?
Yes. I don't know if they had him with Peak at one point in time.
I think so.
I think they had him with Peak. I think they were just trying to, I mean, I'm good. I'm good with them giving him the opportunity, right, to sit and watch and learn and understand what the expectations of you are in this defensive-minded structure that we're trying to get everyone to buy into here and to implement. Okay, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that. But we have the game against the Sabres, which was. Now, tell me if you were surprised by this. The game against the Sabres, the Bruins ended up winning 4-3 in overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the second start in a row for Joonas Korpisalo. And I don't know, I found that a little bit surprising, but also in a good way, because I want to give Marco Sturm some credit for saying to himself, listen, I got what I needed to get out of these guys in the game against the Islanders. There was a message sent. The message was received. You play hard. You buy in. You're going to earn your spot and likely keep it on this team. So to have Joonas make a second start in a row, Lohrei sits out the second game in a row. And I wonder if Marco thought that he might have inadvertently potentially started a little bit of a goalie controversy there. Like, what is the message that he's sending? To me, the message was, listen, I'm going with the guys that I know are going to give me the best chance to win, which I think is a big part of a coach's job description.
Yes. Yeah, I thought it was great. I was surprised, but not disappointed just first from hearing it and then, of course, seeing it. And I think it did several things. One, we heard from Korpisalo, rightly so, he was disappointed that he wasn't given more opportunity in net, and he absolutely should have, because last year he was better a lot of the time than Jeremy Swayman, and he should have been given the net several times based purely on performance, and he wasn't. So it was nice to see a coach recognizing that, kind of to your point. If you're going to go either above and beyond or you're going to just make a huge difference, I'm going to recognize that and give you that chance. And that was good to see, because that was a
can't be a coach that keeps talking about not having guys buying in and being on board and blah, 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 and then roll out the same lineup all the time.
Right. Put your money where your mouth is.
That discredits you, in my view. That discredits you as a coach.
Yeah, 100%. And I think seeing him not repeat what I also thought was a pretty significant issue last year, and who knows, maybe the coaching staff last year didn't feel like they could do this. Like, nobody got sat last year, with the exception of like that one time that Pasta was sat. Freddie was never a healthy scratch. Korpisalo never got the net when he earned it. It was weird, and
accountability was very much lacking.
Yeah.
Last season.
And I don't know if, again, the coaching staff felt like they were not in a position where they were allowed to. Who knows? But so I liked that he did it for that reason. I also liked it because it's been discussed out in the ether, and admittedly so also by Swayman, that he thrives on competition. One of the reasons why he was so good when Linus Ullmark was there was because it was, I think, a genuine competition for the net in a respectful way, but a genuine competition that drove him to want to be better. And hopefully, if not necessarily there being a controversy, but building and developing a little bit more competition between the two of them, likely could serve as an excellent motivator for Jeremy Swayman. And I think that it paid dividends because by the time we saw him in net again against Carolina, he was perfection. So it did what it needed to do. And to your larger point, it shows the team. I'm not, bullshitting when I say, if you do what I need you to do and you work really hard, you are going to be rewarded. Simultaneously, if you cannot get your shit together
Right.
and you continue to just either ignore the plan, or you're just not capable of executing on the plan, because I'm thinking in this instance specifically of Mason Lohrei. I don't know. Is he just not getting it? Is he just ignoring it? Then you're going to get scratched because you are a liability, and
To us.
we can't have that. So I was pleased on a number of fronts. I think it accomplished exactly what it needed to do. It made one goalie happy, rightly so happy, fired up another goalie. We got what we needed out of him. It was perfect. It was exactly what we needed. And he did a great job. His Korpisalo's stats are somewhat misleading because, they're not spectacular, but he's making key saves at points in the game that then have the potential to turn into opportunities that the Bruins then need to take advantage of. Whether or not they are, that's a separate issue, but he is giving them a key moment save for this team to go and run with it. And
I think competition is good, even in-house, right? It's never a bad thing to know there's someone that you have to look over your shoulder, say,
Yeah.
this guy's out for my job.
Right.
I want to keep my job.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I thought that was a great game in spite of, the penalties and everything. I mean, we're creeping back up. That's gotta kind of stop.
That's still a bone of contention with me.
Yep.
However, they pull out a win in overtime.
Mhm.
Morgan Geekie extended his goal streak to 6 games, to which Pasta said, paraphrasing, that he thinks Morgan can get 50 goals this year, which is coming from Pasta. That's
bonkers.
freaking cool, right?
The fact that a Boston Bruin, let alone Morgan Geekie, that it's not David Pastrnak, the fact that a Boston Bruin is in the running right now, granted it's the beginning of November, for, most goals is insane. It's insane. This is where we're at.
They did have a 3-1 lead in that game against Buffalo. They fought their way back in to tie the game. So here we go to overtime. And I thought, well, isn't this kind of weird in a scary way that Marco's got Marat Hustadina out on the ice for the overtime with Hampus Lindholm, thankfully. And it escapes me who the other guy was. Was it
Fraser Minton?
Fraser Minton.
Along with
Fraser basically picks off a pass.
Yep.
And those two boys are off to the races. And you could tell that Marat was thinking shot the entire way in. And I'm so glad that he had that shoot mentality, because it was a beautiful shot.
Yep.
And he beat Alex Lyon. And he scored his first as a Bruin.
Yep.
And his first was an OT winner.
Yeah.
And good for him.
Yeah.
Good for those guys. And good,
Yeah.
Again, I'm giving Marco some credit for having that faith and confidence in those young guys.
Yeah. And it worked out tremendously because, if they hadn't been able to pull it off, that would have really sucked.
Right.
So
right.
obviously this accomplishes so much because not only is he putting then that trust in them and they actually execute on what they needed to do, you've got young players, new to the team-ish players, talk about being able to get additional buy-in. He's still doing that kind of thing as a new coach. It's just a month in. It's not always a 100% guarantee, even if players say like, up front, yes, of course I'm going to buy in, but deep down, do they trust him? That's not something you can just decide. You have to earn trust. And that just helped propel that relationship that he has with his players. That just did so much more than win them a game. It really did.
Those guys earned that opportunity. They have been working hard, playing hard.
Yes. Doing their job.
And doing their jobs, right? So credit to those guys.
Yeah.
And then we have a game against the Carolina Hurricanes on Saturday afternoon, a matinee game against a very, very good hockey team.
Yes.
Granted, they kind of lose their luster in the playoffs, it seems, year after year, but they're always
boring.
I know, but they're a good, solid, strong hockey team. And typically the Bruins, matinee games, we've had this conversation before about the fact that for some reason, they have sleepy starts to matinee games.
Yep.
And I was worried about that, knowing the opponent that was coming into the building, but that was not the case at all for the Bruins. They started off very aggressively. They were physical. They maintained a great pace of play with the Carolina Hurricanes. Dare I say, that was likely their most complete game of this early season. And that third period of hockey was some of the most entertaining back and forth hockey I have seen this season.
Yeah, I agree. And I had specifically brought this up in our snapshot preview of this game that to this point in the season, Carolina, they are an offensive powerhouse. They have averaged...
Their forecheck is suffocating and relentless.
They've averaged 33 shots on goal over the course of, I think it's like 11 games or something to that point. And only...
But do you want to hear a fun fact? Kind of a little bit of a shocking fact?
Yeah.
Apparently, the Hurricanes have the worst power play percentage in the NHL right now.
That's a surprise. That is a surprise. They checking now because I did the math on this because this is how I figured out, obviously, how many the average shots on goal at this point. They've only, out of 11 games, they've only gotten fewer than 30 shots on goal 3 times prior to this game. They were 27, 28, and 24 shots on goal. The Bruins held them to under 30 shots on goal. They had 29 shots on goal.
Well,
and so
again, that speaks to that defensive structure, right? This is what we've been... I think we saw in this game against Carolina what that structure is supposed to look like when you play from start to finish in that manner.
Yeah. Well, and I bring this up also to say, because again, people might be thinking, well, the Bruins were playing against a defensively decimated Carolina Hurricanes team. So, of course, what do you expect? They had it easier than a team maybe a couple weeks ago would have had because, they were out without Slavin, Gostisbehere, and Keandre Miller. So they were missing some big players there. Shockingly, Seth Jarvis played. I certainly didn't think he was going to because he took a shot to the foot like the day or two before.
Yes.
But the fact that when we're looking at just the shots on goal, the fact that the Bruins held them to 29 shots on goal tells me that it was truly the Bruins being the reason they won and not the reason they won was because Carolina was easier to play against, because they still only got 22 shots on goal against Carolina. So clearly they were still doing their job defensively. Their goaltender was still doing his job defensively. So I think genuinely it wasn't just a full 60-minute effort. They were good, like objectively good. They were better.
And Carolina is not a team that plays a physical style of hockey. So for the Bruins to come out right from the get-go and establish a physical level of play, you started with, Jeannot trying to go after, Taylor Hall, right? And you get a little scrum going that way over by the bench. And Casta was physical. McAvoy and Zadorov in this game in particular against Carolina were absolute hitting machines. It was, and poor Zadorov, the Bruins were very disciplined in their game. They only took one penalty in this game against Carolina. And the penalty itself that was called against Nikita Zadorov was total bullshit, in my view, because he gets called for making a good, strong play on the puck simply because he's bigger than the other guy, which is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But be that as it may, only one penalty in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Carolina's forecheck in the second period did create problems for the Bruins because the Bruins didn't get a ton of offensive zone pressure in that second period, and they were scrambling a bit in their own end at times, but they weathered the storm. But that third period, there was no scoring in that game until the third period.
Yeah.
And that third period of hockey was pretty damn good.
It was fantastic. It was exciting. It was really, really nice to see. And hopefully that kind of continues to grow and develop, and that we see that again in the next game against the Islanders as a pretty quick rematch, because we are now at this will be game 4 of kind of this new lineup, new mix of players. It can only continue to get better with time.
Casey Middlestat had a couple of points in that game too. He had
chances.
He had a goal. He had an assist, and like I said, I loved the chemistry that I saw between Victor Arvidsson and Casey Middlestat in this game. It seems to be growing ever so strongly, and I think Victor Arvidsson is starting to come into his own a little bit too. We know he's not afraid to shoot, but when those shots start going in, it's nothing but a positive for the Bruins.
Yeah.
Mason Morai, that out another game. So to me, it begs the question:
what are they going to do with him?
Is he the weakest? Is he the weak link? Because Jonathan Aspero has been.
He's been good. He's fine.
Fine.
He's not causing damage. That's the bare minimum at this point.
The other one, though, that we need to keep an eye on is Henry Jokiharju. Turnovers are becoming a little bit of an issue for this player. So that's just something to keep an eye out on moving forward. Now, I get, at some point, you signed Morai, you gave him more money than I was willing to give him or would have given him.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to need to see the ice again. But where do you put him back in? Where it's a safe place for him to maybe again.
Third pairing. He cannot be.
He cannot be a top pairing guy.
Bruins are in such a fragile place right now. They've effectively restarted their season. Tomorrow is like game 1 all over again, because we are at 500 basically, and
they are.
We've only got so many more games until we are at the 22 game threshold, which is usually Thanksgiving, although because of the compressed schedule, it's about a week before, where we will know if the Bruins even have a chance. So if they're a bubble team at game 22, it's going to be, they're going to be fighting tooth and nail for every single point for a chance to possibly get a wild card spot. If they are more than 4 or 6 points out by game 22, it's really not likely to happen. We're going to spend another season done after April 17th or whatever. So they can't risk it right now.
As it stands right now, the Bruins have won 3 games in a row, 4 out of 5. They haven't lost a game since Hampus Lindholm came back in the lineup, and Mason Lohrei has been out of the lineup. The next stretch of games that the Bruins have are huge, because you're playing the New York Islanders. These are all in conference games. You have the Islanders again on Tuesday the 4th. You have Ottawa at home on the 6th. And then you see the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday the 8th for the first time this season. So these are all significant points for you to try and put in the bank as you deal with this crazy month of October. And November. So, we usually do our game previews, right? We try to do a little bit of a game preview here. And I'm just puzzled about who's going to be in net for these games, because I'm assuming that Swayman will take the net against the Maple Leafs on Saturday.
Yeah.
So then how do you balance the games against the Islanders? Do you put Korpisalo back in net for the game against the Islanders? Or to your earlier point where you say that Swayman seems to struggle mightily against the Senators, does Korpisalo get the net for that game and Swayman gets the Islander game?
I think so. I think Swayman definitely earned the Islander game. There's no reason that he should not play that game. And it also accomplishes, again, 2 things. That Thursday when they play the Senators, put Corpy in net. It went so poorly, don't do that. And it's a rest, and it then sets Swayman up for the game against the Leafs. And then their next game after that is against the Leafs again. So it's a very, very busy divisional stretch that we got coming up here. So
and
I think that's
again,
what's going to happen.
Points are at a premium. You're now sitting at 500. It's almost like you have somewhat of a fresh start, clean slate.
Yeah,
okay,
it really
you're at
is.
500. Keep that momentum going. Get points, right? I'm not saying that you need to win all of these games. It would be great, but at least focus on taking points away from these games.
Yeah.
So now we get to our segment where we do our stick taps and penalty box. So I'll start with your stick taps.
Yeah. Obviously, the fact that the team has worked really well together as a whole to get themselves back at even. It's not that they're at even. It's the fact that it's clearly been a true whole team effort. And you really need to see that, especially during a season that is clearly a season of transition. New coach, he's sticking to his guns. He's following through. He gets that other stick tap in that he's holding players accountable. He's rewarding players who do extra. He's keeping Zadorov and McAvoy together while it's still working.
Keep making me happy with that. I love that pairing.
Yeah. And you got to love Murat Husnudinov and his moment right now. We don't know how long he's going to be up on that line, but as long as he continues to do what he needs to do, he's going to be earning promotions when they become available. And, I will also throw in stick taps for Mark Kastelik because he also earned himself a promotion up to the third line.
Correct.
After his
Well-deserved.
last couple of games. I mean, he's been hunting for a goal at least each of those last 3 games. He's just really elevated himself in that regard too.
Yeah, and I think he's missed on that fourth line, to be perfectly honest with you, because, I'm going to jump to my penalty box, but Johnny Beecher, totally unnoticeable.
Yeah.
Totally unnoticeable. And I didn't even know he was playing at all in that game against Carolina. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this player, but he's definitely underwhelming.
Yeah.
Definitely
the question for him is going to be, will he because he's not been playing, right? And so as a pro athlete, he doesn't want to not be playing. However, if he says, well, I want to play and then send me to the AHL, he's got to go through waivers. And is it possible that he gets picked up? It could very well be. And so if that's a reality, Boston doesn't want to give him away for free. So at some point you have to wonder, if Boston doesn't want to give him away for free, he's got to then be asking for a trade. And so when do we see him depart the organization?
I think it just
coming.
Seems it's only somewhat of a matter of time. It's just not happening here for him for whatever reason. And it's not due to lack of opportunities.
Right.
He has been given, in my view, ample and fair opportunity.
Yes. They gave him a spot on the roster, on the NHL roster after the training camp. So, but it's hard to really make a difference if you're not playing, and it can't be great for his development. So if I were him, I'd be saying to my agent, I need to be playing.
Right.
We got to figure something out.
Right. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
How about your penalty box?
The penalties, it's been a little bit up and down. They've had games where it's been better. They've had games where it's been worse. So I think they just have to keep working on that. Their penalty kill has been excellent, but you've
got to keep your best players out on the ice 5v5.
Right. You can't have that be overused, those players. That's dangerous when you've got such a condensed schedule.
Correct. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And the injuries, not beneficial, particularly Elias Lindholm's injury, but I've got Marat in stick taps because he's earned his opportunity. And I think that's, again, good messaging by the coaching staff. And I put Marco Sturm in my stick taps. Just overall, his messaging. I was getting a little tired a week or so ago hearing Marco's messaging about the buy-in and, not everyone's on board. And even some of the so-called, the leaders regurgitating that. And, again, so early in the season, we're like, really, we're hearing this already? And we've already grown tiresome of it. So to their credit, they have put their money where their mouth is during this stretch of time. And the hope is that they can maintain the steady level of play that we have been seeing. It's been a slow build. And I think the game against Carolina should solidify for them. If we stay in our structure and if we play the right way, we will be in all these games. You're not necessarily going to win them all. No one expects you to win them all. No. Just be in the game.
Right.
And see what happens.
I will say, if it's a winnable game, they better win that game.
No.
That's
I'm not letting them off the hook. No. I'm not letting them off the hook.
Yeah.
But, again, after listening to Charlie McAvoy talk and others talk about, what sounds like a dramatic change from the way in which they've been playing for years.
Yep.
And not having enough. And I don't know if this is, management blowing smoke up our ass saying, well, we really haven't had enough time to practice and work on these things, and it's a new system and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine, right?
Mhm.
That's fine. But you can ill afford to have big hiccups
Mhm.
when you have such a difficult schedule, and banking points is going to really matter when you come back from that Olympic break, especially if you're still somewhat in the mix of things.
Yep.
Right? So
Yep.
the other penalty box for me, other than echoing what you said about the penalties, is Henry Jokiharju. I just think, right, you can ill afford when you're finally getting some momentum to have a player who is turning the puck over, and the potential
Mhm.
that turnover will happen at an ill opportune moment in time. And I think that's why Mason Lohrei is in a bit of a timeout right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. But I think that's all she wrote.
I think that's all she wrote for this episode, folks. We thank you for listening. We thank you for your support. Please like and subscribe to our content so that more people can find us. You can find us pretty much on any social media platform. We are on X. We are on Substack. You can find past shows on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Just search for Bruins Tape to Tape. And with that said, do you have any closing thoughts?
Go Bees.
Go Bees!